Deep breath.
Come on.
Let's go!
Yeah.
Let's go!
That's nice.
Let's go!
Let's go!
We did it! Oh my God, we did it!
Yes, you guys, we did it! Oh, I'm so psyched. What's up? It's me, Ryan. I am the host of the Struggle Climbing Show, and I just sent the proj. Oh, I love watching that video. You ever do a thing? You do like a hard thing, and then you just watch that video over and over again? I am still in that phase, and I am loving it. And this conversation today with one of my main co-captains on this road to V8, Coach Nate Drolet, is all about the process and the struggles and the breakthroughs and ultimately the send of the hardest boulder I've ever climbed. That's a V8. The hardest thing that I had done prior to setting this goal about a year ago was a V4. So V4 to V8 in about a year, and we talked through kind of what that meant and what I did to get there and the ups and downs along the way. And I just have to say, it feels pretty friggin' good. You guys, I'm 46 years old and I just did the hardest thing I've ever done as a climber. I mean, it's different, right? It's different than doing really hard sport routes. Like, it took me longer and more goes to do the force. So I guess the force is probably still the hardest thing that I've ever done as a climber. But this one was way outside of the comfort zone to be a route climber and not really much of a boulderer at all, and then just say, all right, I'm going like full into this thing, and full into it did I go. And that's maybe what I'm most proud of, is just like putting my head down and really putting in the work. I like totally transformed my mind and my body in order to accomplish this, and I'm pretty friggin' psyched on it. You guys know I'm pretty friggin' psyched anyway, but yeah, I'm really happy with how this process went, and I hope this episode is helpful for whatever kind of road you're on, whether it's a bouldering road or a sport climbing road or whatever. I think Nate does a really good job here taking us through this experience. And then on the backside, I'm going to talk a bit more, talk about a few other factors that Nate and I didn't touch on with regard to my experience climbing this super hard thing for me at 46 years old. And then, of course, you know, the feet hit the dirt and it's like, what's next? And so I kind of know a little bit about what's next, but we don't talk about that in this conversation with Nate. But I'll tease a bit of what's next, even though I'm fully in celebration mode right now. I love a goal. I love a bold goal where the outcome is far from certain, and that was definitely the case with this one. And so I'll probably be diving into something like that soon enough. But first, let's explore the process and enjoy the send of this wickedly fun boulder called Bulldog with our good friend, Coach Nate Drolet. Guess what? I did it.
Dude. Yeah. Dude, it's awesome.
You never believed in me, so I'm here to just rub it in your face.
You're absolutely right. You know, I was like, well, I'm going to be coaching this one for a while.
Yeah.
You know,
Gonna be milking this cash cow.
yeah, exactly. It's awesome. I'm super excited to be having this conversation. I actually, right before this, I went back and rewatched all of the videos you had sent. There's so much I want to talk about, but yeah, so it's been, I guess, 3 days. Like, how are you feeling?
I feel really proud, I have to say, man. Like, this was one that pushed me out of my comfort zone more so than the road to 13A.
Yeah.
So putting myself out of the comfort zone in terms of taking on a bold bouldering goal in a kind of a style and committing a lot of my time into an area that isn't like immediately where my mind goes when I'm like, ooh, I want to do some fun stuff. It's like, okay, I'm going to go try a limit move and just try to get my butt off the ground for an hour. And then there's my session. So like, there's just, it just pushed me in a lot of ways. And so long-winded way of answering that, I'm quite proud, not just of the achievement, and it does feel very cool to have achieved sending this boulder in this grade, but also just proud of myself for kind of doing it, for like putting it out there in the universe and then actually following through. It's a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I had a question about that actually too, because you talked about, you know, this making you uncomfortable. And I think it's rad for the amount of days you put in, and especially watching your progress along the way, it seems like you did a good job of kind of showing up each day and pushing yourself a little bit, being uncomfortable. That seemed like a pretty consistent through line. How, at least from my perspective, how do you feel about that?
I announced the goal in January of 2025, so a little over a year ago. And that was essentially coming off of the fall season and achieving the 13A, climb with the force, and thinking like, okay, what's the next kind of way I can push myself? And rather than just be like, oh, I want to do another 13A, or I want to try an 8A or whatever, this bouldering goal came up almost just out of wanting to find a thing that would make me the most uncomfortable. Like, well, what would invite the most struggle into my life?
Yeah.
And that's where this came from. So that was announced, a little over a year ago, but I didn't identify the objective, the boulder of Bulldog, which is on the friction slab boulder here at the Redwood River Gorge, until the fall. So,
Okay.
I went through a spring season and did a lot of sport climbing, got into the summer and put the kilter board in the basement and knew I was training for something. You and I had conversations about tractor trailer down at Chattanooga. I had talked to some people about Orange Top Blue Sky, which is a V8 out in the craft boulders. And I had gotten a message back in January when I announced this goal from this guy, Ben, who interweaves throughout this story. So I'll shout him out now. But Ben, at the time, I didn't know at all, but he sent me a message after listening to the episode and was like, hey, my favorite V8 anywhere is Bulldog, and it's right in your backyard, man. Like, have you checked it out? But I wasn't in the mind yet of finding the thing because it just felt so, I don't know, theoretical at that point in time, if that makes sense. And so the first time I set eyes on Bulldog was May 7th, and I was like pretty psyched. But again, like, I just wasn't ready to start, and we were coming up on summer and I hadn't started my training or anything like that. So flash forward to my first session on the boulder was November 17th, 2025.
Okay. So long jump between seeing it and trying it.
Long jump. Yeah. Went like a full spring and summer of just basically training. And we can talk about the training in a bit because that's one of the biggest levers that, kind of helped to unlock this thing. But in terms of just my relationship with Bulldog, and then I broke this into two sections, Puppydog and Bulldog, because in Puppydog, which doesn't have a name, but I've just kind of given the name of Puppydog, was my original goal for this, as you recall, was it kind of breaks into like what the guys thought was a V6, what I think is a V7, although I haven't done it in isolation because I just switched over to Bulldog halfway through, but it is not much easier than Bulldog, I will have to say. But in any case, at the time, I was sold this bill that starting on the right arete would be easier and a good idea to progress, which I agree with. I think that was your thought for me on tractor trailer as well, which is just like, okay, you can kind of do multiple grades on one boulder while, working on the boulder. Mm-hmm. So Puppydog, I sessioned November 17th with Eric Hurst was my first session on it and landed the first couple of moves that were hard, and ultimately I made very easy and then ultimately threw away because Bulldog climbs totally different. And this is one thing that I will say for the audience is like essentially my theory just kind of fell apart because the way I ultimately climbed Bulldog, the beta that worked for me, there's almost no overlap with Puppydog until the last three moves.
Yeah.
It just didn't serve me beyond, I will say the value of it is it got me out there and it got me in a routine of just showing up at this thing and trying hard and looking at it and talking to it and just going out to the red and not bringing a rope. It just kind of, it helped ease me into being a boulderer at that boulder, even though ultimately I don't know how much I would count those early sessions towards like a quote unquote, like how many sessions did Bulldog take? Cause like I ultimately almost used none of it, practically speaking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Like watching the right entrance, the Puppydog, it was immediately, that's what jumped out at me was I was like, oh, even though the hands end up being the same, essentially, like how you're climbing it is totally different. Like you are getting experience at that angle on the hold type. that style, but it's not a one-to-one. The link up is totally different. So yeah, I think that was a smart idea because that was the first thing that registered. The second I saw you doing the link from Bulldog, I was like, oh, these are different climbs.
Yeah, they just ultimately felt so different. And by the way, both super fun, super high quality. And I will go back and do Puppydog because it's just like, it'll be a fun, different challenge. And there's some other friends of mine that now want to go out and session there. So it'll give me another thing to do out there. But yeah, I think that taught me quite a bit. So ultimately, we'll dive into this. So I'll try not to delay us too much on the chronology here. But I did 6 sessions focused on Puppydog.
Okay.
And those took me from November 17th to January 13th. And I made kind of steady progress through Puppydog to the point where I got to the lip and then kind of like exploded off and had like what to me was like kind of the scariest thing that could happen, which is just like coming off awkwardly from, up high. And I was fine, which was great. And it was a very helpful moment for me, kind of like smacking hard down on my asana pads and being fine. And I think I included that clip for you where I went from the bottom up to the lip and then came off.
Yeah. Was that when you hit your shin on the tree?
No, that was on a
High
Bulldog
start.
attempt. So this was a little bit earlier than that, where I was out there back with Ben. So Ben, who had initially told me about it, and he sent Bulldog in that session. He was repeating it, but it had been many years since he was out there. And so he was pretty psyched. And so that was a very helpful session for me, because I saw him do Bulldog.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went from ground to the lip on Puppydog and then came off because I didn't quite know what to do at the top. And yeah, that was like, I would consider that a breakthrough session, even though, again, not a lot of that climbing translated to Bulldog. It was a real bouldering session, like I tried hard and made attempts and then like got almost to the top and then took a scary fall and was fine. And so it was just like a kick-ass session, regardless of how much it fed into like the ultimate objective.
I like this a lot, and I like that you did good journaling, that you've kept this chronology, because a lot of times people really struggle to journal and track things when everything's kind of going well. When you're like, oh yeah, I'm making progress session to session. Like a lot of times people will pay more attention whenever they're like, oh no, I've been plateaued forever, or like I'm out of shape. Okay, now I need to journal. Now I need to track things. So they really only have a lot of evidence of when things are going wrong. If they look back, they don't have the evidence of, oh, everything was going well, I'm making progress, and here are the things I was doing. And so what ends up happening is when they do look back, and like what we're doing right now of, hey, here was a productive period where you saw progress, they only remember kind of the high notes, and they kind of mythologize this entire thing. They say, oh, well, actually, I mean, it was, that period years ago, it was a straight line path. It was so obvious. Everything was right on course. And then I sent my project, where in reality, no, it was probably super messy. There were a lot of like odd days, weird sessions, times where you go to Vegas, you throw out your back and you're like, oh no, am I going to even top out boulders anymore? Like that stuff is part of the process. And I think keeping this is so important. And then also just like sessions like that, I think as a boulderer, yeah, learning how to try hard, being comfortable off the ground, these are important things. It's no different than sport climbing, where, man, some of the most valuable days of sport climbing are the days where you take a bunch of falls where you were going for it and trying hard. It's like, yeah, you didn't clip any anchors that day, but it really flips a switch for you.
For sure. And, one of the things that I did with my journaling process on this, and I did this in a new app. Actually, it's an app that I developed with another climber that's going to be coming out very soon. It's not released yet, but coming to an app store near you soon. It's been in development for a long time, about a year. Anyway, I've been using it, and it's kind of takes what I've always done with my paper journaling and brings it into a far more robust platform. But one of the features that I added to this and that I got a lot of value out of on this process was that every time I logged a session, at the end, I was given a journal prompt to enter in what I felt went well and what I'd like to work on the next time. And then the next time when I start the next session, it prompts me with that. It reminds me of what I said last time. Hey, here's what went well last time. Here's what you wanted to work on. So I started every session on Bulldog with real focus and intention, because I was reminded, oh, okay, last time I really got this pinch well because I set my hips this way. What I wanted to work on was keeping tension on the left heel long enough to cross my left hand over to the other hold, or whatever the case may be. I'd have these notes, these little reminders, because it might be weeks between sessions. And in fact, many times it was just because of, like you said, I went out to Vegas and I hurt my back. And so I was able to stay focused, and every session felt like was high quality, whether I was out there by myself and it was like garbage conditions. I was still finding ways to interact on the boulder. So I always felt it. I always left the boulder feeling like I had made some progress of some sort. And yeah, we can talk about that. I'll finish up the chronology here, and then we can talk more specifically about like what the difference makers were. But in any case, in February, so I took quite a bit of break because of that trip to Vegas and hurting my back. So I didn't get back to Bulldog until February 21st. So that's more than a month that was off between that kind of big breakthrough session from Puppydog where I got to the lip and then getting back to the boulder. And I got back to the boulder, and because my back was still a little tender, I didn't want to try to go to the lip again right away. And that was the next logical thing for me was to send Puppydog, because I'd gone ground to the lip. Now I just had like 2 more moves to top it out, but I was scared. So I was like, I guess I'll just start the Bulldog moves because those are low. It's a hard start and that'll protect my back. And man, I'm telling you, like, it just, the universe works in funny ways, Nate, because like if I hadn't hurt my back, who knows how many more sessions I would have put in on Puppydog. But here I hurt my back. So I started Bulldog and like immediately started sticking these like hard moves off the ground that I thought would take me a long time to do. And like, I just started doing them. So I kind of, that might have expedited, if you will, a bit of the process here. Getting injured in a funny way, you know, allowed me to focus on Bulldog, which was the objective. And so I did 5 sessions on Bulldog from February 21st to March 24th. There was 5 sessions, and I sent on that 5th session.
Man, that's really cool. I mean, that's not a ton of time. I mean, hard climbing is hard. That is, I will say that till the day I die. Like, it is just so challenging mentally, physically, technically, tactically, like everything. It demands a lot, you know, and it could be very easy for you to have just been like, well, I'll just keep trying Puppydog, you know, and like, why should I try a V8 if I haven't done this, you know, V6 first, or, you know, whatever. There's a million reasons to not put yourself up to bat. And climbing's really unique in that way because, you know, I used to be a distance runner, and it didn't matter if I wanted to try and run a 6-minute mile, a 5-minute mile, or a 4-minute mile. I'm still getting on the track no matter what. Like, it's then, okay, well, how am I feeling? And I can kind of speed up. But climbing's funny because you have to choose your arena. You have to be like, okay, today I'm going for a 440 mile. I'm hopping on the 440 track. Like, and this is it. I'm not allowed to do anything else. Like, that is really unique. I think it's something that can be very challenging. And I think in this, like, I love that you saw this through. And it is kind of funny, you know, the idea of you tweaked your back and you're like, oh, I don't know. Okay. And then you're like, well, let's just stay closer to the ground. And it kind of, it sounds like it forced your hand and helped you a little bit to be like, well, let's just try this. And then worked out great.
It's so funny because I'm such a little noob boulderer. It really is wild to me how things can come together from feeling utterly impossible, not even improbable, but just like I see Ben or one of the other guys that I'm out with, Kyle or somebody like that, do a move. And I'm like, oh yeah, that looks fine. And then I'll go try it and like nothing, can't, like the butt stays on the pad. I'm not even like upward motion whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then I'm not talking sessions later. I'm talking like attempts later. And like I do the move. I'm like, what the hell? What dark voodoo happens between like it going from I cannot even generate to, oh, every time I do this, I'm now sticking it. It's just like, it's witchcraft. And I guess that's like maybe what keeps boulderers going, because otherwise everyone would just quit all the time.
Yeah, it is. It's witchcraft. It's a process you need faith for, because you're not getting more fresh, more recovered. You're not getting stronger in that same session with more goes. You're actually getting more tired every time you pulled on, but you're getting more progress. That's incredible. Yeah, you're learning how to coordinate your entire body better, to do the move better. And it is amazing, especially when you have that faith in the process and you just say, okay, like we're just going to keep giving attempts and giving the best quality efforts we can and look for ways to improve each and every go. It's wild the difference you can see. And honestly, sometimes just a handful of goes, like 10 tries, something can go from like, I can't pull off the ground to I'm almost sticking the move.
Yeah. It was such a rewarding process in that and very hard for me mentally in the beginning. And we'll get into some of the training because I think some of the training that I was doing that Kevin Kukovic over at Kilter was having me doing, I think really helped me to mentally get comfortable with some of those sensations. But before we dive in, I've got my like list here of kind of what I feel were the key difference makers that I'm very curious to get your take on as well. Now that you've seen the Send video, which I'll release by the time this podcast comes out, or I'll release it kind of in conjunction with it, just as somebody who knows the boulder, who knows me, and who's a climbing coach and a hell of a boulder, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. Like, what did you think?
Oh man, I thought you did great. And it was fun getting to see session to session because there were so many times like in the earlier sessions where I was like, well, you're not really getting in a good body position before you cut the heel, or, you know, whatever it is, you're not placing this heel super smooth or getting off of the ground. You know, you first started it with a stack of 2 pads. I was like, okay, cool. That's a good place to start. And I was very happy to see, okay, then you moved it to 1 pad very quickly. And it even looked better off of 1 pad. Like you progressed not just geographically moving up the boulder each section, but I felt like you climbed it better each time. And it was very clear on this end go, like, especially when you had the arete and went to hold the swing, I was like, ooh, he's doing it very well right now.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we can talk about this. Maybe let's just talk about kind of the Send of Bulldog, and then we can talk about these points that I think kind of help to elevator me up into the Send of Bulldog. But I will say that on the day, I went out there with such high confidence, dude. Like I thought first go it was going to go, because the prior session I had made it to the lip, and I don't know if I sent you this video or not actually, because maybe I didn't want to blow the surprise. But there was a prior session, like I don't know. Oh yeah, it's when I hurt my ankle. I sprained my ankle.
Okay.
Coming off, I hit the tree. And so that session, but not that go that I sent you, there was another go that I went from the ground up to the lip, controlled the lip, turned the corner, started walking my hands up the thing. And literally the only thing I had to do was get a foot on top of it and mantle it out. And I had not practiced the top out.
Oh no. If only we could have known.
Only somebody had told me. Oh God, it's okay. It's going to be like a real fun, teachable moment here for the listener, which is I actually had rappelled early on in the Puppydog days. I had thrown a rope over the thing and wrapped down it, and so I'd scoped out the top, but I hadn't practiced the top because it's actually really hard to practice it in, at least the way I had rigged the rope, on a rope. Because there wasn't a bolt up there that I could see. And so I had it like tied to a tree and I was rope soloing it. And so I didn't have anybody belaying me. And then I kind of had to drape over the top instead of the side. And anyway, for many logistical reasons, I was able to scope it out, which was like more discouraging than I ever would have thought, because I got up there and I was like, holy shit, there isn't a hold on this. And it's basically kind of slopery, and turns out there are holds. You just have to know the nuance and tick them like I did. But, in any case, I hadn't practiced the top out. So on this prior session, I did it very well, ground to the top, but then just couldn't top out. And I was scared, and then I hurt my ankle. And so I took like 5 days off, wrapped the ankle, got all in my head, but then went out there feeling good. And I was like, okay, it's going to go right away. And it did not go right away. In fact, it was probably the most challenging single session I had ever on the boulder. And then I sent. Like, I dropped the first move, which I hadn't maybe ever dropped since the first day. I when crossing over from the left to the right, where you do the big squeeze move, I barn doored off of that multiple times and, foot pops. I would set the left heel, which is a pretty technical heel, and I'm not a very experienced heel hooker, but like I got it to the point where I was able to hold that heel really well. But on this day, the heel was popping out. I mean, just like so many things weren't working. And it might have been because there was a really big crew there. And like all the Louisville guys were going out sport climbing that day. And they're like, well, we'll just pull over. And so, I mean, there's probably 9 people out at the boulder, and the only person climbing it was me. And so, like in my head, I was like, I'm holding these guys up. I want them to go do their thing. I had the cameras going because I'm trying to document the process. And so I do think that there was a bit of a rush kind of mentality. I don't know. I don't think I felt like expectation, to be perfectly honest. I just felt like I was holding people up, or, like eyes were on me type situation. And so once they all left, because it got to noon and they're like, we got to go. I was like, yes, thank God, please go. I'll see you later. I took a break, I took a breather, and Ben Berg. So for those who are listening, Sarah Berg was a guest on this show as a weekend warrior, and her husband, Ben, have a couple kids, and they got a cabin at the Red, and we've climbed together a couple times. And anyway, they came out, they were on a rest day. And so they came out just to support me. So then everybody left except for those 2, their kids, and then a couple other friends who were in town. So it was a smaller crew, and I didn't feel like I was holding anybody up because everybody was on a rest day. And then Ben came up to me. He's like, hey, like you're for sure strong enough to do this boulder, man. I'm seeing you do these moves. Like you got this, but you're kind of rushing it. It seems like you're over gripping a little bit. Like maybe you're trying to just like get through it fast or something. I'm not sure, but like, you just got it, dude. You just like got it. Just kind of try to climb it slow. Just, know that you got it. And so it was good advice. It kind of like shook me out of the little like frame of mind that I was in where I felt like I had to get it done. And then I just pulled on and did it. So, it might've just been a pressure thing or getting the yips out or something like that. But when it went, it didn't feel like it was max, which I think is a lot of people's experience when they do like the hardest thing they've done. Is I was screaming at the top, as you saw from the video, but those were like fear/excitement screens, not like totally. I'm powered out, like this is a limit move. Like I knew I had it. As soon as I hit the lip, I knew I had it. But then I just started screaming because I was just like, I don't know what to do with all of these emotions.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
man, that's awesome. And something that also really stood out to me that I liked a lot whenever you did top it out is one of the first things you said was, we did it, which I thought was really cool. Because like watching the videos, you always had other people with you for the most part. I will also say one thing you left out in your sequencing. You went out there. Was that your kid that you were with? Just you and him that one day?
Ferris. Yeah, my buddy Ferris. Yeah.
And it was funny because you like did a big link and you're like, oh, okay, well, I got to come back. I just need a spot. And he was like, yeah, you just need a spot. We got to get you a spot. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then the next video was you biffing it from the top and like hitting your ankle on the tree. I was like, oh, he was right. He needed a spot. Like, because I was like, oh man, like I would just go for it for sure. Like, but yeah, then you blew it off. I was like, no, that was a good call. He needed the spot. Like,
yeah,
because you hit the tree with a spot. Like your spotter like pushed you to keep you in bounds. Yeah.
Yeah. He checked me pretty good, and I still hit the tree because that tree is somewhat inconveniently located. Although I will say that I had never gotten close to that tree in any other attempt because I always came off to the right. Mm-hmm. But on this one, as you saw, my right hand dry fired. So I actually came off to the left.
Yeah.
So it was like it wasn't a fluke, but it was kind of an unexpected trajectory that I came off. But it's funny because I sent that same video to Kevin Kukovic after I had that session with my son. Mm-hmm. And he said the same thing. He was like, dude, if it was me, I would have just gone for it. You look locked in.
For sure.
And I was like, dude, I can't, like, as a father, I cannot like crater, and then my 11-year-old has to like, try to drag me to the road or something.
Yeah. I know. It's like right after our last episode, you were like, oh, I don't know about falling off of high boulders. And here I am this time. I'm like, I don't know. Just go for it, brother. Like,
right.
Yeah. So good call. Great decision. Apparently, two coaches also like, do as we say, not as we do kind of thing. But
but also it was that much more special because I also was aware of as you saw in that video, and I posted this video for people to see, I think, of me out there with Ferris, that was the moment, that session was the moment I knew I would send.
Cool.
And every session before that, I was like, I'm making progress. Oh, this is cool. I'm learning. Oh, this might go. And then I had that session with Ferris, and it was like, absolute, this is happening. Like I just knew it. And that is such a cool feeling. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to that right now have experienced that on a route or in a gym boulder or outside, whatever. It's almost like you get to send it twice. That the moment that you know you're going to do it, and then the moment you do it. And then usually in between those two, the wider the gap is, the more anxiety starts to come up about like expectation and, I should do it and all that. But there's that sweet moment where something happens and you just know you've got it. And that was that session.
Oh, that's super cool. That's cool. You got to experience that with Ferris too. Like, cause I think to me, that is sometimes even more gratifying than the actual send, because it's, depending on how big the goal is, sometimes you pick the goal just saying, I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is a big reach. I'm excited for it. In that moment of knowing, I can do it. Like, that's kind of the proof you need. Like, that's what you were shooting for to some degree. And I've definitely had it before. And I think the way you said it is perfect. Like, that gap between when you have that moment and when you send, that's where anxiety can build. Right. But I've definitely had it before where I have that moment and it feels like the send, and I actually have to convince myself. I'm like, no, we got to go back. We need to go see it through to completion. But I think that's such a cool thing to get to experience.
Yeah. And then for that reason, I basically it had a reverse effect than sometimes on long sport routes, where then I'm like, okay, let's get it done. On this one, I was like, whoa, this is going to be over pretty soon. And I'm just going to enjoy the hell out of however many more sessions I get to have on this. And I will go back for more, because this has been a really special experience for me. Being aware that it was almost ending really made me grateful for the extra sessions that I had. So the next session, where I would have topped out if I had practiced the top and then ended up spraining my ankle, it was a mix of emotions, no doubt, because the crew was there and it just like felt right. And like, had I done it, I would have been psyched. But even coming off of that and even like rolling my ankle and whatever, I was like, ooh, I get to go back. I get some more of this one. And so that was a really special moment with Ferris there. And then on the day, I guess I'll say, before we get into maybe kind of some of my bigger takeaways here, the other thing that I feel like kind of, was the biggest factor in it going that day was actually practicing the top out. And I will credit Kyle Fisher for this. Kyle, if you're listening, you deserve credit here, because he made me do it. And I did not want to do it, because for those who know this boulder, to top out this boulder is a little bit scary. It's quite a bit scary. It's pretty tall. Like when you're topping out, you're probably at like 12 feet. And I know it's all relative. So I'll just say, for me, that felt very tall and scary.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And also, it's a slab top out that is covered in moss and pine needles, and then goes up like another 20 feet of moss and pine needles. And then you have to down climb in like a squeeze chimney, kind of like an off-width, manky, mossy chimney, where you're like, it's like your knees are on one side and your heels are on the other. It's like I was in plumber's crack all over again, And so I was like, look, I just don't, I only want to top this thing once. Just when I send it. And so Kyle was like, fine, just send it. And so like I gave an attempt, and like I didn't send it. And he's like, okay, now do the top out. And so we got me up to the lip on a ladder, and then the guys pulled the ladder, but I had to do like the last few moves, which aren't easy moves by any stretch, but I was fresh. And it wasn't hard, but it was heady. And so having done it, when I started up on my actual send goes, it really removed like a huge amount of like doubt and fear. So ultimately, I'm like, I am not saying anything groundbreaking here whatsoever, but I will say that the reason I didn't practice it was because I was scared to practice it. And that's a pretty good reason to practice it. And it just took somebody to kind of like force me to do it. And it made a big difference, you know, when I sent, like I said, when I hit the lip, I knew I was going to send. And that's because I had done those moves. Like I knew there was no unknowns. I was like, oh, okay, now from here, I work up the rail and I get my foot up and I just stand up on this thing.
You know, it's funny because you say this isn't groundbreaking, but this is a thing. Like this is a thing that goes all the way up. There's a devastating video of Liam, I think his last name is Abersworth Bancroft, AB, climbing squows in Las Vegas, gets up and there's a big jug and it's like V2 to the top that I don't believe he had rehearsed. He had rehearsed the moves just to the jug, climbs the, you know, V14/15, whatever it is, to the jug and spends 2 minutes not sending it.
Oh no.
And like 90 seconds in, he's like, oh no, this is a disaster. Like he says it out loud and you're like, and you watching, you're like, this is a disaster, Liam.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And he ends up blowing it and like I don't believe still has come back to send it. But yeah, so this is such a thing. The basics are the basics for a reason. Like, yeah, practice the top out, you know. I love that Kyle kind of bullied you into it. I think that's what a good partner does, is just like, hey, this may feel uncomfortable, but I am your friend. I want to see you succeed. So I'm going to kind of nudge you a little bit here.
Yeah, I really appreciated it. And you know, my excuses or my reasons for not doing it were kind of like in retrospect so silly. Like, oh, it's, you know, a little scary, but like, I'm going to do it. I mean, that's how you send the boulder. So like, you know, do that. And like, oh, like the down climb is kind of a hassle. And like, it is kind of a hassle of a down climb, but you know, like I was still outside with friends and I got to do like some kind of manky chimney and that was kind of, we all laughed and, you know, like it was all fine. I was creating kind of an unnecessary roadblock there. And yes, fortunately, Kyle, and then some of the others there as well, who kind of had his back, peer pressured me in the best possible way into rehearsing the top out. And so, yeah, I would say that was, you know, one of the big difference makers. And then kind of technically speaking, the other big difference maker on that route was me figuring out the heel hooks and a toe hook. And so that was the one bit of beta that I changed. I'm kind of oftentimes dip back into a conversation that I had with Ethan Pringle, and his common refrain through it was there's always better beta. And he doesn't care if he's on day 85 on a project, he's looking for that better beta. I talked to Bill Ramsey recently. He was saying something similar as well. And so I didn't expect to find new beta on this last day. And yet I did, because I had always up until that point, when my left hand hit the lip of the boulder, I had a high right heel. You kind of hug that right arete with your heel as you work your way up. And you even noted this earlier. You said, oh, his body wasn't in the best position for when his feet cut. So every time prior to this, and I'd gone to the lip, whether it was on Puppydog or Bulldog, I'd gone to the lip probably 10 times. And every single time I hit the lip with my left hand, there's like a left hand sloper and your right hand's on a decent side pull. And I would cut feet because the right heel would kind of slide off of the right arete there. And then I would stab my right foot onto a decent foot and you kind of work your way around to start the top out. On this go, rather than paste that high right heel and hope it holds or just kind of agree to cut feet, I actually dropped my right foot and toe hooked it and toe hooked the arete. And like, lo and behold, I go up and I slap that lip with my left hand and I'm just stuck like a freaking gecko to that rock. My feet didn't cut. And I even like smiled. I was like, what? Because I just had never had that experience. I'd never hit the lip in control. And so then I just like casually pulled my right foot and put it on the next hold and worked my way around. And it was the most controlled I had ever done that top. And it's because I switched from a heel to a toe. And then the other heels, you know, worked very well. Like there's a pretty technical left heel and right heel on it. And so for somebody who doesn't do any outdoor bouldering really, and I almost never use heel hooks at the red, to learn how to kind of technically use heels and then toes by changing the beta on that last go was something I was very, very proud of.
Dude, that's awesome. I completely agree. I think those were, you know, more technical heels. And this is something that was a bit outside of your wheelhouse. And also, I love the idea of trying to think there's always a better method. I think that is a useful way of thinking. especially if you can find a good balance. Like some people, especially boulders, can get stuck in the mindset of always just trying to find the perfect beta. And it can be an escape from ever trying hard. Like, well, I'll keep
Right.
trying to find the perfect method and then I'll actually finally try hard. It's
Yeah.
like, that's just not going to work. There are a lot of problems that the beta is try hard. Like, there are moves I can do 10 out of 10 times as long as I am giving at least 90% effort. Anything below that, I have no chance. Doesn't matter what beta I use. But yeah, I think having that mindset of no matter how many goes there is on something, I can always improve how I'm climbing, how I'm moving, what I'm doing. It doesn't even have to be macro beta of, I used this heel hook instead of a toe hook. It could just be, oh, well, maybe I'm on this toe hook and maybe I just sag out a little further away from it or,
Sure.
things like that.
Yeah.
So,
The
I love that.
nuance, which I discovered on this as well. So, all right, that covers kind of the climb itself. Now I'd love to just cover for a few minutes here some of the broader pillars that I thought kind of went into helping me to do this. And the first one that I've written down here is, and I'd love your opinion on this, having worked with different personality types. So I'm going to speak from my personality type here because this was my goal.
Yeah.
But probably single biggest factor that went into me doing this was deciding to do it and then making it public and then talking about it often. And I think maybe some people, some personality types wouldn't thrive in that. But for me, like saying it out loud, I want to climb a V8. This was before I even identified Bulldog, but like saying that out loud and then starting to talk about it, having these road to V8 conversations with you. And then Kilterboard came aboard to, like help me get there and started working with Kevin. And I even had a conversation with Eric Hurst and he's like, I think this is maybe not the smartest goal, Ryan. Like you're in the mid 40s, you're a sport climber. I don't know about ground falls or whatever. And then me like having to defend myself. So then now I'm like doubling down on this stupid goal of mine. I'm like, no, you're wrong, Eric. This is going to be good for me. And so really just like setting this thing and saying it out loud and then kind of having to be held accountable to it in some extent. Not that like people were messaging me and like, what's going on with this or whatever, but just, it just made it real. And in that realness made me then get intentional about how I was going to actually achieve it. So I would set like real training goals and a training plan and look for boulders. And so all of that came from setting it and saying it out loud. And I think if I hadn't done that, there would have been any number of places where I could have just been like, nah, this actually doesn't feel right. And since I haven't said it out loud, I think I'll probably just go for a V6. But maybe that doesn't work for everybody. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think this is a great question. I think it's going to be different for everyone. I think first off, you have to be able to believe in the goal. Like had you said, I'm going to climb V13.
Right.
And you just didn't believe in it, it wouldn't matter. For some people, I think it's not going to work if you overreach. And I think that for you, this works well, or clearly, one, it worked. Therefore, it worked well.
There we go.
But I think the fact that it motivated you, one, it meant you were now having these different conversations with different people and kind of outsourcing and saying, okay, how do I do this? And you were very open to learning from a lot of different people. This spurred that. Had you kept it to yourself, maybe you wouldn't ask these questions. Or if you did ask these questions, people aren't going to know where to meet you. Like if you say, hey, my goal is to climb V8, here's where I am, here's my whole situation. People can suddenly meet you where you're at. And you got to have all these good conversations. You were clearly open to learning. Then the fact that you got some pushback from Eric and you had to suddenly say, okay, is this actually a good goal? Is this right for me? I think that's super important. I think for the right people, this can be a great way to go. And I do think having the right community around you goes a long way too. Because if you just say this out loud, into the ether, fine, sure. But if you say it, especially to people who you respect, I think it can be a good way to go for a lot of people, but everyone's different. Some people like keeping things closer to themselves. But I think what also really matters is paying attention to the process. Because for you, it wasn't just like, ooh, this is my goal. It was like, this is my goal. Okay, let's zoom back. How do we get there? What are all the steps going to be?
Right. And one thing that I will say that maybe is different than if somebody was a V8 boulderer and their passion is bouldering and they say, I want to do a V12 or something like that. The unique situation in my case is that this was like a very new and foreign and kind of like Gumby-esque world for me. And it allowed me to just throw myself into it like with a full beginner's mindset, which was a real joy.
The idea of a beginner mindset is, it's funny. Some people might be hearing that from you and they're like, well, he's climbed 513. Saying that you're a beginner seems silly. But I think the idea of a beginner mindset, it's just that. It's a mindset. And for someone who is going from V8 to V12, that is something you can still cultivate. It's funny. I came across this quote this morning while I was reading. It's from physicist John Wheeler, and it's, as our island of knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance. And I mean, that's just it. If you wanted to go from V8 to V10 now, you've experienced so much of bouldering that I bet you have so many more questions now that you'd be like, you may have been like, oh, it's kind of simple to go from whatever to climb V8. Like there's only so many things. But now that you know what you know, you realize there's so much more that you don't know when it comes to continuing to climb harder. And that to me is also just very exciting because it's like, oh, there are so many avenues for how to get better. Like it's infinite. And the better you get, the more you realize there's just so much that you're terrible at. Like, I love it. But yeah, so I think that mindset is something anyone can cultivate regardless of whether they are a longtime boulderer trying to get better at bouldering or if they're going from sport climbing to bouldering, whatever it is.
I'm not going to let you talk me into V10 just yet, Nate, but I like,
No. We're going back to sport climbing.
Did I tell you this? I walked off the back of the boulder and me and the crew there threw the pads in my car and I drove straight to drive by and I rewarded myself by getting on a rope. And so
amazing. No, you hadn't told me that.
Yeah, no beers were cracked. I went sport climbing to celebrate. But let's focus on the boulder because there's like a little burning fire in me that's a boulderer. And so I am still pretty hyped on what the potential can be for me as a boulderer going forward. The next thing that I jotted down here is making a huge impact. And again, this is not going to be in the groundbreaking category, but it's to choose a project that you can get out to. And I had so many conversations with people about Vegas and Chattanooga. You recommended some incredible boulders for me in Chattanooga, which is not very far away. What is it, like 4.5 hours or something like that from here? Do you know how many times I made it to Chattanooga? 0 times.
0? Yeah.
I've never been to Chattanooga because I guess what I discovered is that with the young kids, there's a big difference between a 2-hour, a 4-hour round trip and like a 9-hour round trip. And I think I recognized that pretty early. And so after scouting out Bulldog and thinking like, ooh, I'm pretty inspired by this and I know I can get to it, it really made a big difference for me. And so there were days when I would drop my kids off at school about 8:30 in the morning. I would drive straight out to Bulldog and have the pads in the back, drive out to Bulldog. There was a day where I drove out there and it was cold as shit and like ice was all over the top of it. And I laid the pads down and I tried the first move like 5 times. And then I put the pads back in the car and I drove home and I picked the kids up from school. And so I spent 4 hours in the car for about 30 minutes of attempts. And like, I was still psyched on it, but I couldn't have done that anywhere else. And so, if ultimately Bulldog took me somewhere in the 7 session range, depending on how much we include from Puppydog, that would have been, at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 trips to somewhere else, to Vegas or Chattanooga or whatever, which for me and my lifestyle right now just doesn't work. So picking a boulder that was close that I could just pop out to for just like 15 minutes and just kind of check in on it, or like on a sport climbing day, just on the way in or out of town, say, hey guys, do you mind, can we just like pop over there, just see how the conditions are? Yeah, it just made a huge difference. It made a huge difference being able to get out to it.
Yeah, I love that. It's hard to climb V8 if you don't climb on V8. As it turns out, I think this is perfect. It's the same. I mean, it's no different to me than with sport climbing, and it can't be bouldering, but like with sport climbing, yeah, maybe there is this one perfect route that you're so excited for, but man, if it's at a crag where no one wants to go to and you're constantly trying to drag people out there and you can't
Yeah.
get partners, who cares if it's the perfect route versus, man, there are so many amazing experiences I've had where I'm climbing with a buddy and he's like, oh, well, I'm really excited at this crag this season, whatever it is. I'm excited on the mother load. Like, okay, I'll just pick something I'm excited on. And because we get to go there consistently, have a good partner, whatever it is I pick ends up being a great route for me. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think it's funny because when I climbed at the Red all the time, I was very much, if I'm sport climbing, I sport climb. If I boulder, I boulder. I completely forgot that the Bulldog existed. Like until you were like, oh yeah, the Bulldog. I'm like, but the Red is sport climbing. Like,
Right.
and I'm not saying I'm correct in any way. Like I very much blend the two a lot. But yeah, it was very funny. You were like, oh, the Bulldog. I was like, oh, that's right. There are boulders in the Red. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's others too, which I'm really hyped to check out. But this one was even in the pantheon of boulders at the Red, this one is arguably the absolute most convenient. I mean, it's 30 seconds off the road and it's on the way to or from almost any crag you would ever go to. So it wasn't a huge thing for me to go out there with a crew and say, hey, can you give me a half hour on this? And we'd hang the flashboard from a tree branch and everybody would just kind of warm up on that while I was trying my thing. And there was almost nothing lost in that case. So it just was very, very convenient for me in my current situation. Now, if you don't live near anything and you're just like taking trips to go wherever, then I get that. A lot of the training is going to be indoors and maybe trying to replicate or simulate. You take a scouting trip, you come back, you train, and then you go try to put it down. And we've had conversations about that in the past. This one just worked out quite well for me, so I could keep checking in on it. But this brings up the next point, which I think was, we're talking kind of theoretical there. Like what mattered? Well, pick a goal and say it out loud, or make sure you pick a boulder that's nearby that you can check in on. This one is like kind of a very tangible difference maker that I think, and that was that I was incredibly intentional about training as a boulderer for like 6 months straight. I don't think I did 2 endurance workouts, which I know Eric is going to be really upset to hear. Sorry, Eric. But I mean, I did go out like sport climbing, so like I wasn't doing nothing, but my training was to train as a boulderer. And y'all have heard, I've had conversations with Kevin Kukovich, who's a coach over at Kilter, and he wrote me some programs, one for my Kilter full ride, the home wall that I put in my basement, which is the biggest difference maker in this entire thing, no doubt. And one for like kind of off the wall. And so it focused so much on my shoulders. We did so much Arnold press and shoulder press and crossover symmetry and incline bench press. And we did some hangs, we did some finger stuff, but he knew once we identified this thing that it was just going to be physical. And so we did a lot of like lower body, and we did squats and we did deadlifts, and like he just worked to get me prepared to get into these squeezes and hugs and gastons and heel hooks. So on the physical side, I think I've just never been stronger in my life. I mean, taking me back to when I played hockey and lacrosse in high school and college and all of that, and was doing all the S&C stuff. I'm definitely in the best shape of my life right now in terms of strength from a boulder focused workout that he gave me. And then having the Kilter in the basement is nuts. And I'm sure plenty of people are listening to this right now and they're like, God, what a ridiculous luxury. But I've worked hard my entire life and I'm 46 years old and like I'm an adult. And if I want to put a freaking Kilter board in my basement and my wife says it's okay, then I'm going to put a Kilter board in my basement. And it is the best move I've ever made as a climber, I have to tell you. And the gyms are about 30 minutes away from me. There's no gym in town that has an adjustable wall. And so to have one here with 2 young kids and the jobs and all that, I could get in a hard board session and learn what it felt like and be in the discomfort of making limit moves, which are very hard for me as a route climber. And Kevin programmed a lot of boulders for me where the crux was the first move. Yeah. And God, I hated that. But there's a really hard first move on Bulldog. And so it just trained me to recruit and like lock in and just go, you know, from move number one. And so having that board there, having the strength workout focused around bouldering, just clocking in, doing those 2 board workouts and 2 conditioning workouts a week for 6 months. It's like, it like transformed me. I'm like a totally different physical person today than I was 6 months ago, which is pretty cool. Like I'm proud of that certainly at my age as well, to be able to do that. It felt really rewarding.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. For one, yes, specificity matters. Train. If you want to boulder hard, you need to train like a boulderer. It's no difference. If you want to sport climb hard, you need to train like a sport climber. Like, these things matter. And I think it's very easy to muddy the waters for both. People who are sport climbers, when they try and boulder, they're just sport climbing on boulders. Like, they go and they're just kind of sessioning, and they're not really trying that hard, and they're not intentional with the problems they pick. It's really easy to go down that path. It's the same thing. I will see people who are trying to sport climb hard who really just like, they just like bouldering. They're just bouldering all the time, and then they only sport climb when they climb outside. And it's like, okay, well, that's cool. You're now basically just a boulderer who spends time on a rope. Like, if we really want to be fit for sport climbing, we need to also be doing hard work in the gym. So yeah, I think specificity, number one, super important. Second, oh man, home wall. I completely agree. I mean, I am 30-second walk to my board. It makes such a huge difference. I mean, for you, yeah, a 30-minute drive, that's significant. Like, that is, you know, you can carve out whatever 80 minutes out of your day pretty easily to be able to get to your wall, basically get a full session in and be done. And then you're right back at work.
Right. Yeah. And that's essentially the drive time. You know, 80 minutes, if it's 30 minutes each way, that's 60 minutes. But then, you know, the shenanigans of getting in and finding room on the wall and doing the warm up and all that. And so, yeah, I can warm up while I'm helping my kids get, you know, in between like bath times or whatever. And then they go to bed, and I can come downstairs and like charge for 60 minutes on the board. And then I'm still like eating cereal and watching TV with my wife. And, you know, I'm still able to be a husband and a dad and have my jobs and all of that. But train hard for a really hard thing for me. So yeah, highly recommend. And yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the transformation that it's had on me. It's crazy how much it's translated to routes, Nate. And I think we talked about this a little bit in our last conversation, but having not done really any endurance training whatsoever, and and being kind of in this like strong bouldering phase, and then taking on very hard endurance routes and kind of floating them, it's wild to me. It's wild how much stronger I've gotten, but also how much of that strength has made me seem like I've got more fitness when I know I don't have more fitness.
Yeah. No, dude, that is phenomenal. I mean, it's why I think all sport climbers should spend periods every year, or if not, just more consistently every month, even if it's just like once a week, whatever, bouldering. I do think bouldering periods are super useful. I think for you, this was such a great situation because you had such a long sport climbing focus that even though it was, yeah, you're board climbing once a week or whatever it was, it's like, yeah, that's good, but it's not the same as saying, okay, we're actually going to become a boulderer for a little bit, because then there are so many more things you have to learn. You have to learn about this nuance. You have to learn about, man, just pull on and go right off the ground or right off the bolt, whatever it is, right off a rest. Being able to really flip that switch. That is something that is really hard to learn just by sport climbing compared to spending times where you say, okay, my goal is to become a good boulderer.
Yeah. And there was quite a bit of dissonance. I want to make sure the audience understands that this was not like an easy thing for me to do, just to be like, okay, I'm a boulderer now. There was, when I was in those early few sessions of going out to Bulldog and trying it, and I was psyched on it, I still always had the sport kit in the car, and we would start at Bulldog and then go somewhere else. And so I was splitting these days. Okay, let's start at Bulldog and then let's go to Torrent or Roadside or out to Drive By. And it actually took a total stranger. I don't know who they are. I'd like to thank them. Maybe you're listening and you know who you are. Sent me a message and was like, hey, until you leave that rope behind, you're not going to be fully giving it what you need to give it. Like you need to give up sport climbing for a little bit. And I resisted the hell out of that. Like I was like, delete, I don't want to
block.
Yeah, exactly. Block for life. Cause at that moment, I was just like, I just got so much and continued to get so much joy out of sport climbing. But then, those words actually kind of started to pick at me, and I started to do a little bit more reflection. And the first time I ever went out there without my rope, and I just went out to Bulldog, there was almost like this release. I was like, I don't have to rush through this. I don't have to just try to put in my goes and then try to save a little bit in the tank so I can go try to send that random 12A or whatever. Like I can just be here and take as much time as I want and just play around on this boulder. And it was really cool, but there was quite a bit of resistance. So I guess to your point there, if you're a sport climber and as Nate says, like it's so beneficial to have these bouldering phases, maybe you don't have a goal like I have where you really like do need to kind of go into monk mode and try and, pick a team or whatever. But there is something to be said for at least not trying to perform as a sport climber in that. And so as soon as I kind of let that go and I was like, no, actually, I'm just going to be a boulderer now. There was all that discomfort went away and I just kind of got excited and it made my training more focused and it made my trips out to Bulldog more focused. And so, yeah, it really did make a difference. I don't know what that'll look like going forward. I mean, I'll still continue to rock it on the kilter board. I love it. And I've sent a handful of V7s on my full ride, but not a V8 yet. I'm very close to a V8. So I'm still going to charge hard with my goals on my board, but I think it'll be more balanced now going forward. Like I'm going to start bringing sport climbing back into the fold here.
Nice. Yeah. I think that's a good call. Yeah. What is the plan from here?
Well, there's one last point that I have on here that was kind of a big difference maker that I want to touch on. And then, we can talk about kind of what's next, which I actually don't really know. But I'm curious of your thought on this because the note that I have here is get out with a bunch of different people and try to learn as much about, potential different betas as one can. So, I mentioned Ben, who I'd been climbing with. He climbs Bulldog totally different than I climbed it. But really, the only point of information that I had was that session with him when he sent. So I was like, okay, that's how it's done. And so I started to try and climb it that way. And then my friend Derek sent me a video that he saw somebody post on Instagram of doing it. And it was a totally different way. It's the left start, which I ended up going with. But when I tried that, I was like, nope. Like that's, like I already mentioned, I tried that move and it felt impossible. But I was out with some of the stronger guys and they did it that way. Again, not the way they had done it, but they were like, oh yeah, that move actually can go. And so then I did that. And then I climbed it with a different set of friends on a day and learned about how to kind of hold the heel in longer in order to make one more hand move. And so maybe I would have discovered this all on my own, but I think this was accelerated learning by getting out there with a bunch of different people who climbed in a bunch of different ways, some who were really tall, some who were shorter, almost all of them, probably all of them, to be perfectly honest, stronger than me. And then watching videos too. And so, I'm curious from you, because I think I've heard you and Chris talk about, the real benefits of trying to just figure things out yourself. And no doubt there's that. But I ended up using and trying a ton of different ways to slice up this boulder. And ultimately, I think I did it maybe a way that was unique. Like it was a Frankenstein's monster of a bunch of different people's methods of doing it. But like ultimately it might, I don't know if others have done it exactly like how I did it, but I know it would have taken me many sessions longer, I think, if I hadn't gotten as much information as I did either in person with people trying it or just like looking at some of the videos that are out there, which there aren't many, but I do think it probably saved me a few sessions. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. If that's a net benefit to try to kind of accelerate beta learning that way, or if you feel there's maybe even better ways of doing it.
I mean, I think it depends on what the goal is. So if this was an easier climb because this for you was, the pinnacle.
Right.
I think it's okay to lean into tactics a little bit more. And I also think you did this in a good way. So what I do not recommend people do, let's say if you were like, oh, I'm going to go to, I don't know, Vegas, and I want to climb a bunch of V4s and V5s because building a base is good. The last thing I would want you to do is get up to the boulder, pull out your phone and be like, okay, let me watch all the videos. Let me see how everyone's doing everything. And then just do no thinking on your own. Just try and copy and paste. That is the worst thing you can do for learning. It takes this opportunity for growth and it steals it from you. You know, it's like you're not going to go over to your kids, I don't know, geometry homework and be like, oh, watch out, this is easy. Give them the answers. They're not learning. That's not good for them. You want struggle. Struggle is very important. Funny.
The check is in the mail.
Good. Yeah. Just got to say it 3 more times to hit quota. Yeah. Like the struggle is everything. And so trying these moves on your own and saying, okay, like, I don't know, but then seeing other people do them and then having these conversations of, well, how do you do that? Why does that work? And trying to understand, well, okay, Kyle does the heel this way. Why can't I do it like that? And instead of just saying, well, Kyle's shorter and stronger, you can say, well, let me think more. Is he placing it differently when he's pulling? Our legs are very articulate. You can pull on them or push with them in any direction you want. How is he doing that? What is he doing with his other leg? Where's his center of mass? I think climbing with other people, looking at their styles and studying them as just different schools of thought is such a great way to learn. And yeah, gathering data from them is useful, but stopping and saying, why is this useful? And trying all the different methods. You know, if you try the same move with 10 different methods, you do a lot of learning, especially if you're stopping and you're really being introspective about why does this feel good? Why does this not feel good? I think that is so much different than, you know, just opening up an app and swiping through, looking at all the videos and trying to say, okay, who do I copy? Because to me, that is the last thing we want to do.
Really great nuance there. And I think ultimately that's maybe I started with kind of watching something or seeing something and saying, oh, I'm going to copy that. But then I would immediately get some biofeedback and be like, oh, that felt weird. Or, let me see if I can make that easier. And that is maybe a point in support of working on Puppydog. While a lot of the moves didn't translate to the way I did them on Bulldog, I got to know this rock and I got to know kind of different positions. So like, oh, I grabbed this with a Gaston, but then I grabbed it with a right hand pinch. And then I actually was able to toe, like it just helped me to kind of build out my encyclopedia of body positions on that piece of rock, which I think was very valuable. And seeing a lot of people do it in different ways then gave me an idea. Oh, well, let me see if I can try it this way. Or, oh, actually, I could reach a little bit further than him. What if this further down foot is better? So yeah, just keeping like a super open mind. And again, it's maybe that like kind of beginner mentality that I had where anytime I had a session with somebody out there, I just learned because they were all doing stuff that was more advanced than me, which was cool. And that's like maybe a parting note that I'll put on this, by the way, is just the community was incredibly helpful for me on this one. And, you know, the direct community, like the crew that I would go out there with, but then I would post a video and people would send me, for the most part, very supportive and kind and thoughtful notes on it. Like either, hey, you're looking great, which is always just good to like feel like the progress is going well and feel like people think you can do it. That's good for confidence. But then I would also get some like really thoughtful notes from people. Hey, did you think about this? Or it looked like your hips were here or whatever. And, you know, sometimes unsolicited advice can be a bit of a drag to get, but it was the right amount. I got the right amount of thoughtful advice from the community on this one. And I really appreciate it. So thank you all for following along on this journey. And I do want to end this with a very, very heartfelt thank you to you, Nate. You kicked off this road to V8 with me and have been just an incredible, you know, road trip partner along this journey, guiding me, coaching me, keeping me stoked and just believing in myself. And I think that belief really carried me, Nate, I have to say, because it seemed like a pretty bold thing for me to take on at the time. And in hindsight, I'm like, no, you know, now it worked. But like, it's been a year since you and I first talked and I said, road to V8. And you're like, all right, let's do it. Yeah. And so I'm incredibly grateful for your support along the way here, man. I could not have achieved this milestone without you. And now I'm just like looking on to like, what's the next one? But I'm going to try to enjoy this for a bit. And I hope my win is, and in some small sense, your win as well, because you helped to get me here, buddy.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, man. And dude, it's been cool seeing the work you put in. Like you nailed it. This was the way, like, of just keeping consistent, like having that beginner's mindset and not getting deterred by things as they happen, as you like bang up your ankle on a tree or throw out your back, bouldering. Like, yeah, dude, great work. Like you nailed it.
All right, y'all, that wraps things up with Nate. Nate, thank you so much for this conversation and also just for being by my side throughout this whole process here on this road to V8. You are the dude, and I'll see you soon. I'm going to be heading out to Salt Lake City, spend a little time with Nate, and maybe see some of you out there as well. I'll be at CWA, the Climbing Wall Association. I'm going to be hanging out with Kilter and hanging out with Asana Pads out there and doing a live podcast. And okay, well, I'm not ready to sign off yet because there's a couple more things I wanted to talk about with regard to this process. And Kilter and Asana are actually part of that. So, while I just mentioned them, why don't I talk about that for a second? Because Nate and I touched on the tools a little bit with regard to how I prepared my body and my mind to do one of the hardest and kind of most out of the comfort zone climbing things that I've ever done. And two of the biggest factors for that were learning how to climb like a boulderer and having the mindset of a boulderer, namely tackling a fear of falling, which is something that I've just always struggled with as a rope climber and worked through pretty well in terms of climbing on a rope. I've had many discussions on this podcast about that, but haven't really pushed myself in that area as a boulderer, as kind of taking falls without rope. So yeah, let me touch on that for a second here. Kilter, I got a shout out because when I set this goal to climb my first V8, having only climbed V4, because there was no gym in Louisville that had an adjustable wall, I felt like it was the best thing that I could do to help me achieve my goal. And again, I understand not everybody can do something like this. But by the way, if you can do it, I'll put a link in the show notes. You can get up to $1,000 off a Kilter home wall full ride. It's got incredible holds. It translates outdoors so well. And this is, by the way, how well it translates outdoors with regard to like the grading as well. I've done a handful of V7s on my Kilter and was very, very close to climbing my first V8 on my basement Kilter when I sent Bulldog just recently. And so I still haven't sent a V8 on Kilter, but it's super close. And so I'm going to shift part of my goals, part of my sights to ticking my first V8 on the Kilter as well. But the holds that it has and the density of the holds and just the climbs that are programmed in there, it was an absolute game changer for me with this training. And I know the term game changer is just used so often, I am loath to use it anymore because like every ad on Instagram is like, this new pair of socks was a game changer. But having an adjustable Kilter board in my basement definitely was a game changer, you guys. And very specifically for me, as more of a slow twitch muscle kind of guy, a sport climber that is more used to and certainly responds better to when a crux is more in the middle of a route, so I can kind of climb into a crux, if you will. I learned through Kevin programming me climbs like this to try really, really hard right off the ground. And so while I didn't set a very specific replica for Bulldog, I did simulate some of the moves and especially really, really hard moves right off the pad. Like boom, first move, try full hard, like that's the crux of this V7. And it was so uncomfortable at first. So uncomfortable that I started like putting notes for Kevin in like my tracking journal that I couldn't do it. I'm just like, no, this isn't for me. Let's find something different. And to his credit, he pushed me. He really, really pushed me to do these problems that are like the crux is right on the first move. And I think it helped to not only rewire my muscles, I guess, and my tendons or whatever it takes to like kind of summon the full recruitment off the deck like that, but also my mind to really kind of get into that discomfort of trying max hard and maybe not even being able to make one move. And after doing that over and over and over and over again and failing over and over again, I started to actually latch that first move. And then I carried that over to Bulldog. So I would say that was huge. And then just like, physiologically speaking, being able to do really hard bouldering sessions a couple days a week was absolutely critical for me to get those skills and strengths dialed up and ready for me to go out there and take on the hardest boulder that I'd ever done. So shout out to Kilter. I think the code is STRUGGLE, and you can get up to $1,000 off your board if you want to build a board. And I've actually heard from a lot of you who have done this and who are psyched. So that's really cool if you're in that position in life to be able to do it. You can check the show notes for that. And then I also mentioned Asana, and this was huge for me as well, you guys, because I got injured a few times on this road to V8. Once I injured my thumb on Bulldog. I kind of like dry fired off of it, and it just like, I don't know, it just kind of like messed up my thumb it was only a couple of weeks, but I was a little bit in my head about that. Not a terrible injury. Then my biggest injury was when I was out in Vegas, as you all know, and I was trying a bit of a high ball boulder, but the fall wasn't that high. I mean, it was maybe 8 feet or 6 feet or something like that, but I just landed super awkwardly. Not on Asana pads, unfortunately. I was borrowing pads, but I think probably if I had had a better pad set up there, maybe I wouldn't have gotten hurt, but who knows? It was just like kind of a fluke fall, but that was definitely like put me in my head for a while. And then my last injury was when I sprained my ankle actually coming off of the lip of Bulldog, which was crazy. It was a session where I almost sent, but I hadn't practiced the top out. And I came off, I dry fired again. I dry fired this time with the right hand and came off and actually hit the tree. My buddy Tom was there and like checked me hard to keep me mostly from hitting the tree, but my foot kind of slammed into the tree and then like it made me land weird and roll it. And so a bit of an ankle sprain that I still was feeling on send day, but not so bad that it was like holding me back from doing heel hooks or anything like that. But this is a long-winded way of saying that many sessions I had out there and in other places where it was just me, and I session all the time in my basement on my kilter board where it's just me. And having the Asana crash pad system that I've got in my basement, as well as the crash pads that I took out to the crag, really inspired a lot of confidence. And on send day, I brought extra foam. Friends lent me pads, and I had, a good crew out there. You'll see the video. And I ultimately got to the point where I wasn't looking down. And Nate and I didn't really talk much about this in this conversation here, but I think that was a huge breakthrough for me, or just kind of like a big milestone for me to reach on Bulldog, because even up to the session right before that where I almost sent, I was very, very aware of the fall and thinking about it while I got in those higher moves and kind of scoping to make sure my spotters were there and the pads were right as I was getting up high. And when you do that, if you've experienced this as a boulder or a route climber, the more you're kind of thinking about other things beyond the climbing, the less you're able to actually climb at your limit. And so when I did get out there on this day, and I was early on thinking about the fall quite a bit, but then on the send go, I kind of got to the point, I got to the headspace where I really trusted my spotters. And Mark and Ben, thank you guys for being there. And Sarah and Megan as well for like the stoke, cheering me up. So I really trusted the system that we put in place, which was like great pads, had my Asana pads there that I knew and I trusted and I loved, and then a couple great spotters. And so while I was climbing up to the lip there, I wasn't looking down. I wasn't scoping out the potential landing if I came off. I was just making moves. And as a result, the moves didn't feel limit, which is kind of the case. And Nate and I talked about this a little bit as well, but we didn't talk about, kind of what contributed to it. But I think ultimately I was strong enough, I was fit enough, I was dialed enough with the beta, and then my mind was in the right place to just come together. And I don't know if it was flow state or not. It's hard to kind of pinpoint that, but I definitely like felt locked in on that final go. And shout out to Asana Pads for helping me to get there. They're also, by the way, offering, I forgot what it is, 5%, 10%? It's 5% off one of their systems, like the at-home system, and 10% off the crash pads, or vice versa, with code STRUGGLE. I don't know. I'll put it in the show notes for you. But if you're in need of pads, either for home or for getting outside, Asana's rad. God, they're just, first of all, the pads just look amazing. Like the designs are sick as shit. But then also, they're way light. They're very easy to carry, and they're really comfy foam to fall on. So yeah, thanks guys. One thing that I want to talk about too that Nate and I didn't really cover was just kind of the what's next. And It's always such a loaded question, but I will say this, and this came from a conversation that I had with Bill Ramsey recently, and also some reading that I did on the heels of the Olympics, where there's this concept called arrival fallacy, where if you're working on something very, very hard, and it's a goal that you've had for a long time, when you finally achieve that, assuming you do finally achieve it, there's actually like a massive dip in your happiness afterwards. Or in fact, like oftentimes people go into a depression because you do the thing and then you're kind of faced with what's left. And what's left is you who you are, and everything else that makes you who you are besides this goal. And that can be really hard for people who define themselves and maybe their self-worth by their performance or by an achievement. And I'm trying to be aware of that just as I'm still in this afterglow of the send. And the antidote to that, maybe unsurprisingly, but perhaps somewhat counterintuitively, is to kind of immediately find the next thing. And that sounds exhausting in a sense, like, oh, you should really celebrate and enjoy the thing, which believe me, I'm doing. But also it can help to insulate you, if you're of this personality type, which I am, against kind of being like, oh God, now what? And by the way, I like have an amazing, wonderful life that I'm incredibly grateful for with my wife and my kids, and I get to do this show and I get to hang out with all you guys. And so it's not like I'm looking in the mirror being like, what are you without Bulldog? I'm just, I'm still like happy Ryan, but I can already predict like a drop in my stoke to train and get after it if I don't have the next thing. I just very much respond to the next thing. All right. And so this is just me. Maybe it's not you, but as soon as I have that goal, I start to build a plan around it. I start to set goals on my Intentional Climber app, and then I start to check them off. And that gives me like a real sense of purpose and stoke and accomplishment along the way. So what will the road be next? I don't know. It's really interesting. I've already gotten some messages from some friends being like, hey, you seemed within margin there, like V9 ? V10 ? And I actually like, if I just kind of step back and look at it objectively, I actually think that I could push my boulder grade up higher. I think there's some left in the tank there. And certainly if I just like continue to train hard on it, it's no mystery, like it's time and effort. And so if I just put in the time and the effort and the stoke for bouldering, I think I could do more V8s and V7s and V9s that maybe suit me, and hell, maybe V10s or more if I just commit myself to it. But am I going to commit myself to it? I don't think right now, at least. I do think I'll continue to train on my Kilter full ride in my basement, and I want to maintain this rock and boulder strength that I've developed, this core tension, this ability to just like go hard on a few limit moves, the snappiness and the power that I've developed. I want to at least maintain that, and I think I can do that with 1 or 2 really fun and engaging and hard-hitting Kilter sessions a week. And then I think I'm going to set my sights back on the rope. In fact, I celebrated the ascent of Bulldog by doing the gross, terrifying in parts, but not. I guess I was just like riding high, so it wasn't too bad. Down climb on the backside of the boulder, where you kind of do this like squeeze off width and just grovel your way out through some moss and lichen. And so I did that, packed up the pads, and shout out to Kyle for lending me a bunch of foam. I appreciate it, Kyle. And then the help from the crew to pack all that stuff up. And then I promptly drove out to the drive-by crag to meet up with the crew. And anyway, they were out there, and I like promptly tied in and got on a really fun 13A ish. I think it's 13A, called Spank. Really fun, like super, super cool climbing. I don't think that'll be like the project, but I think it could be one that I just check in on every once in a while. But all this is to say, I kind of rewarded myself with the bouldering send by going and getting on a route, on a sport climb. So that is where I will likely shift a lot of my attentions for the rest of the spring. I'll be climbing a lot of 5-point fun routes and maybe scoping out some potential projects for the fall. And I'll do a conversation on fall goals with probably Eric Hurst pretty soon. Haven't done a conversation with him in a while. But what I'm thinking, I'm just kind of spitballing right now because I haven't really gotten on anything. But what I'm thinking is maybe swinging that pendulum as far the other way as I possibly could from wrestling pebbles and take on a really steep cave route in the Madness Cave at the Red. And so there's some 13As and some 13Bs that have my attention. And in fact, I just spoke with one of the first ascensionists of a 13B that I've been looking at called Flower Power. His name's Chris Martin. He's going to be joining the podcast next week for a Weekend Warrior episode that was just such a delight. And we talk a little bit about that one, but some other routes as well. And then in the meantime, I got to build up my fitness, you guys. I've been, checking in on the fitness. I haven't completely let it go. I do sport climbing. I try to do a sport climb like once a week, whether it's at the gym, Rock Sport, the gym that has been saved. If you haven't seen that video, I put a new video up on the YouTube channel about the closure and then miraculous reopening of my beloved grimy old school gym called Rock Sport. So they've got some amazing lead climbing in a cave there that Andrew Gearing has been setting some banger routes on, and some of the other guys from Louisville as well. And then they've also got fantastic auto belays and top rope climbing there. So I try to do something there or out at the Red. And so I think my fitness isn't terrible, but I'm going to work hard to build it back up. And especially if I take on something in the Madness Cave, I'm going to have my work cut out for me. I'm going to get into that pain box, into that Bill Ramsey pain box, and build up the pump fitness. And I'm pretty friggin' hyped about it. And one of the things that has translated in like shocking ways to fitness, to like my sport climbing endurance, has been this newfound bouldering strength. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, I completely transformed my body and my mind in order to take on Bulldog. And I am so much stronger now than I've ever been. My shoulders and my lats, my fingers, yes, but like I think it's more in the body. My posterior chain, my full core, my legs, doing like a lot of leg work. And all of that has translated to steep, pumping, submaximal sport climbing in ways that I never would have imagined. So that was like a big eye-opener for me as well, that like if you're starting to kind of feel in a rut or a bit of a plateau and you're mostly focusing on, route climbing fitness or whatever like I had been, do a bouldering block and it'll just like completely reset what hard feels like. Every move feels well within margin now. And so my critical force has gone way up, even though my endurance hasn't, right? So my ability to keep the moves within kind of an aerobic, recoverable way is much better now because my gas tank is bigger. So I just need to like do some fitness training to fill up that tank with gas. But the tank itself is bigger because I'm much stronger. And so, let's talk with Eric Hurst about this and probably many other things pretty soon. But I am incredibly hyped on that. They're not siloed, and that's given me quite a bit of excitement for phasing my training going forward. So the upcoming phase, I think I'll dive into route climbing, a ton of fitness, and maybe some generalized fitness over the summer as well. Try to get my HRV up and just, I don't know, my VO2 max, like just run some kind of experiments on myself. And then come fall, try to take on some really fun sport climbing objectives, all of which I'll talk about soon. But yeah, that's the idea. I'd love to hear what you're working on as well. And if anything that I say here has resonated or you've got thoughts or ideas, just let me know. And thank you so much. I want to do a little round of specific shout outs if I can. So I've already shouted out a bit of my crew. They've been incredibly supportive on the group chat and just, coming out to Bulldog with me. So I think you guys know who you are. And I just want to thank you. If you've taken a trip out to Bulldog with me or supported me along the way or just sent me text messages or whatever, I really appreciate it. This has been a super fun journey. And now we don't have to stop there anymore. Although I know there's a couple of you who do want to stop there, and I'll be hyped. I want to go back there and try Puppydog and just play around. So it's a really beautiful location. So thanks to you guys. I really appreciate that. I also want to shout out Max Barron specifically for coming out and shooting some photos, and those photos that accompany the artwork for this episode, as well as some others that I'll share, are real banger. He just shoots like amazing stuff. You should follow him. I'll tag him, and you can check out his stuff on Instagram. And I want to thank the crew that was out there to spot me. So I think I already maybe mentioned them, but that's Mark and Ben and Megan and Sarah. Thank you guys for giving me a little love there. And also the whole Louisville crew that came out right prior to that. I'm going to try to remember who it was. It was Kyle, definitely, because he gave me all that foam and he came by. Tom, Gray, Mitch, Max. Who am I forgetting? Zane. Anybody else? Super apology if I'm forgetting somebody. Anyway, you guys are awesome. And to anybody else, Johan, you know, my dude from abroad, from far, not abroad, but almost abroad. Oregon's basically a different country. Shooting me a lot of stoked texts. And the whole Patreon crew, if you're listening from Patreon right now, big shout out. In the strength cohort, which is like a little subgroup within Patreon where we all worked on our strength. I'm going to do an episode on that, by the way. Everybody in the strength cohort's crushing. I just sent my project, but then we got a guy in there, Doug, who went from V4 to V7 on the moon board over the last 3 months of doing this cohort, and Rosie crushing and topping up like all of her metrics and sending things. There's probably too many to list right now, and you who are listening right now who don't know these people probably don't care, but I'm going to do an episode with the strength cohort about their breakthroughs in just putting a lot of focus on building strength and power in this way, and we all supported each other. So shout out to you and also to the entire Patreon crew for giving me so much love throughout this process. I really appreciate it. And by the way, if you're listening to this right now and you are not a Patreon member, I'd love for you to check it out if you could. And that's kind of how I pay the bills and do a lot of things around here and keep putting out episodes like this is through the monetary support of people who join up on Patreon. And I understand that not everybody can do it all the time, but even if you can just do it for like a few months, maybe to congratulate me on this kind of life goal breakthrough milestone of mine, sending Bulldog. It's a V8. Maybe you could pop by and give me $8 or something like that. You don't have to. I can go buy my own send tacos. But if you want to check out a bunch of bonus content, like 150 hours of bonus content with incredible coaches and athletes that will likely help you to level up your training and your climbing, well, then you can do that. There's also a free trial. So yeah, shout out to your Patreon members. I really appreciate you guys. And to you for listening to me ramble in this tail end of this episode, but also just week after week, following along with my journey. I hope you are having a great time on your own journey. Whatever road you are on, wherever it's taking you, I'm here for you like you're here for me. So thank you so much for all of the love and support, and let's just keep frickin' getting after it. I love you. I'll see you next week.